Hello everybody, welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be doing my first of maybe many story times. For today's story times, I'm going to be reading the official US government released 9/11 Commission report. It's online, free to look at, and very informative. I'm going to see if I can physically read all 550 pages in the next coming weeks, months, however long it takes. So turn to a series. And I'm going to be breaking them down by labeling based on the different chapters and the subchapters. And when I mean chapter, I mean there are 13 chapters that is divided into. And then when I say subchapter, that means there's multiple parts in each chapter. And it's around 15 to 20 pages each. So without further ado, we're going to get right started. For chapter 1, subchapter 1.1, I'm probably going to break it up into two. So there's going to be a part 1 and a part 2 of the subchapter 1.1, which is really confusing, but I'll read the first part. I'll read 7 of the 14 pages. Okay. Chapter 1, we have some planes. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, dawned temperate and nearly cloudless in the eastern United States. Millions of men and women readied themselves for work. Some made their way to the Twin Towers, the signature structures of the World Trade Center complex in New York City. Others went to Arlington, Virginia, to the Pentagon. Across the Potomac River, the United States Congress was back in session. At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, people began to line up for a White House tour. In Sarasota, Florida, President George W. Bush went on an early morning run. For those headed to an airport, weather conditions could not have been better for a safe and pleasant journey. Among the travelers were Mohammed Atta and Abdul Aziz Al-Amari, who arrived at the airport in Portland, Maine. Now, subchapter 1.1. Boarding the flights. Boston, American 11, United 175. Atta and Amari boarded at 6 a.m. flight from Portland to Boston's Logan International Airport. When he checked in for his flight to Boston, Atta was selected by a computerized pre-screening process known as CAPS, created to identify passengers who should be subject to special security measures. Under security rules that were in place at the time, the only consequence of Atta's selection by CAPS was that his checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed he had boarded the aircraft. This did not hinder Atta's plans. Atta and Omari arrived in Boston at 6:45. 7 minutes later, Atta apparently took a call from Marwan al-Sahi, a longtime colleague who was at another terminal of Logan Airport. They spoke for 3 minutes. It would be their final conversation. Between 6:45 and 7:40, Atta and Omari, along with Satam al-Sakami, Wael Asheri, and Walid Asheri, checked in and boarded American Airlines Flight 11 bound for Los Angeles. The flight was scheduled to depart at 7:45. In another Logan terminal, Shehi, joined by Faz Bani Hamid, Mohand al-Sheri, Ahmed al-Ghamdi, and Hamza al-Ghamdi, checked in for United Airlines Flight 175, also bound to Los Angeles. A couple of Shehi's colleagues were obviously unused to travel. According to the U.S. United ticket agent, they had trouble understanding the security questions, and she had to go over them slowly until they gave a routine, reassuring answers. Their flight was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. The security checkpoints through which passengers, including Atta and his colleagues, gained access to the American 11 gate were operated by Globe Security under a contract with American Airlines. In a different terminal, the single checkpoint which passengers for United Flight 175 passed was controlled by United Airlines, which had contracted with Huntley USA to perform the screening. And also, I look now, it's going to be a lot longer than it takes, so I'm going to divide the 15-page subchapter into 3 parts of 5 chapters instead of 2 parts of 7. In passing through these checkpoints, each of the hijackers would have been screened by a walk-through metal detector calibrated to detect items with at least a metal content of a .22 caliber handgun. Anyone who might have set off that metal detector would have been screened with a hand wand, a procedure requiring the screen to identify the metal items or items that caused the alarm. In addition, an X-ray machine would have screened the hijackers' carry-on belongings. The screening was in place to identify and confiscate weapons and no other items prohibited from being carried onto a commercial flight. None of the checkpoint supervisors recalled the hijackers or reported anything suspicious regarding their screening. While Atta had been selected by CAPS in Portland, 3 members of his hijacking team, Sakami, Wal Asheri, and Walid Asheri, were selected in Boston. Their selection affected only the handling of their checked bags, not their screening at the checkpoint. All 5 men cleared the checkpoint and made their way to the gate for American 11. Atta, Omari, and Sakami took their seats in business class. The Sherry brothers had adjacent seats in row 2, the first-class cabin. They boarded American 11 between 7:31 and 7:40. The aircraft pushed back from the gate at 7:40. Sehi and his team, none of whom had been selected by CAPS, boarded United Flight 175 between 7:23 and 7:28. Their aircraft pushed back from the gate just before 8. Washington Dulles, American 77. Hundreds of miles southwest of Boston, at Dulles International Airport in the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., 5 more men were preparing to take their early morning flight. At 7:15, a pair of them, Khalid al-Midar and Mahed Moked, checked in the American Airlines ticket counter for Flight 77 bound for Los Angeles. Within the next 20 minutes, they would be followed by Hani Hajor and 2 brothers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Salim al-Hamzi. Hansi Hajmor, Khalid al-Mindar, and Majed Moked were flagged by CAPS. The Hamzi brothers were also selected for extra scrutiny by the airline's customer service representative at the check-in counter. He did so because one of the brothers did not have photo identification, nor could he understand English, and because the agent found both the passengers to be suspicious. The only consequence of their selection was that their checked bags were held off the plane until it was confirmed they had boarded the aircraft. All 5 hijackers passed through the main terminal's West Security Screening Checkpoint. United Airlines, which was the responsible air carrier, had contracted out the work to Argon Bright Security. The checkpoint featured closed-circuit television that recorded all passengers, including the hijackers, as they were screened. At 7:18, Midar al-Moked entered the security checkpoint. Midar and Moked placed their carry-on bags at the belt of the X-ray machine and proceeded through the final metal detector. Both set off the alarm, and they were directed to a second metal detector. Midar did not trigger the alarm and was permitted through the checkpoint. After Moked set off, a screener wanted him. He passed this inspection. About 20 minutes later, at 7:35, another passenger for Flight 77, Hani Hanjor, placed 2 carry-on bags on the X-ray belt in the main terminal's west checkpoint and proceeded, without alarm, through the metal detector. A short time later, Nawaf and Salim al-Hamzi entered the same checkpoint. Salim al-Hamzi cleared the metal detector and was permitted through. Nawaf al-Hamzi set off alarms for both the first and second metal detectors and was then hand-wanded before being passed on. In addition, his over-the-shoulder carry-on bag was swiped by an explosive trace detector and passed. The video footage indicates that he was carrying an unidentified item in his back pocket clipped to its rim. When the local aviation security office of the Federal Aviation Administration later investigated these security screening operations, the screeners recalled nothing out of the ordinary. They could not recall any of the passengers they screened were CAPS selectees. We asked a screening expert to review the videotape of the handwriting, and we found the quality of the screener's work to have been marginal at best. The screener should have been resolved when the alarm set off, and in the case of both Moked and Hamzi, it was clear that he did not. At 7:50, Majid al-Moked and Khalid al-Mindar boarded the flight and were seated in 12A and 12B in coach. Hani Hanjur, assigned to seat 1B, soon followed. The Hamzi brothers sitting in 5E and 5F joined Hanjur in the first-class cabin. Newark United 93. Between 7:03 and 7:39, Saeed al-Ghamdi, Ahmed al-Hami, and Ahmed al-Haznawi and Zayed Jara checked in the United Airlines ticket counter for Flight 93 going to Los Angeles. 2 checked bags, 2 did not. Haznawi was selected by CAPS. His checked bag was screened for explosives and then loaded onto the plane. The 4 men passed through a security checkpoint owned by United Airlines and operated under contract by the Argon Bright Security. Like the checkpoints in Boston, it lacked closed circuit television surveillance, so there is no documentary evidence to indicate when the hijackers passed through the checkpoint, what alarms may have been triggered, or what security procedures were administered. The FAA interviewed the screeners later. None recalled anything unusual or suspicious. The four men boarded the plane between 7:39 and 7:48. All four had seats in the first class cabin. Their plane had no business class selection. Jara was in seat 1B close to the cockpit. Nami was in 3C, Gamdi in 3D, and Haznawi in 6B. The 19 men were aboard four transcontinental flights. They were planning to hijack these planes and turn them into large guided missiles loaded with up to 11,400 gallons of jet fuel. By 8 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, they had defeated all the security layers that America's civil aviation security system had put in place to prevent the hijacking. The hijacking of American 11. American Airlines Flight 11 provided nonstop from Boston to Los Angeles. On September 11th, Captain Joe Oganowski and First Officer Thomas McGinnis piloted the Boeing 767. It carried its full capacity of 9 flight attendants. 81 passengers boarded the flight with them, including the 5 terrorists. The plane took off at 7:59. Just before 8:14, it had climbed to 26,000 feet. Not quite its initial assigned cruising altitude of 29,000 feet. All communications and flight profile data were normal. About this time, the fasten seatbelt sign would have usually been turned off and the flight attendants would have begun preparing for cabin service. At the same time, American 11 had its last routine communication with the ground when it acknowledged navigational instructions from the FAA's Air Traffic Control Center in Boston. 16 seconds after that transmission, ATC instructed the aircraft pilots to climb to 35,000 feet. That message and all subsequent attempts to contact the flight were not acknowledged. From this and other evidence, we believe the hijacking began at 8:14 or shortly thereafter. Reports from 2 flight attendants in the coach cabin, Betty Ong and Madeline Amy Sweeney, tell us most of what we know about how the hijacking happened. As it began, some of the hijackers, most likely Wal al-Shari and Walid al-Shari, who were seated in row 2 in first class, stabbed 2 unarmed flight attendants who were preparing for cabin service. We do not know exactly how the hijackers gained access to the cockpit. FAA rules required that the doors remain closed and locked during the flight. Ong speculated they had jammed their way in. Perhaps the terrorists stabbed the flight attendants to get a cockpit key, or to force one of them to open the cockpit door, or to lure the captain or first officer out of the cockpit, or the flight attendants may have just been in their way. At the same time or shortly thereafter, Atta, the only terrorist on board trained to fly a jet, would have moved to the cockpit from his business class seat, possibly accompanied by Omari. As this was happening, passenger Daniel Lewin, who was seated in the row just behind Atta and Omari, was stabbed by one of the hijackers, possibly Satam al-Sakami, who was seated directly behind Lewin. Lewin had served 4 years as an officer in the Israeli army. He may have made an attempt to stop the hijackers in front of him, not realizing there was another sitting behind him. The hijackers quickly gained control, sprayed mace, pepper spray, or some other irritant in the first-class cabin, or to force passengers and flight attendants towards the rear of the plane. They claimed they had a bomb. 5 minutes after the hijacking, Betty Ong contacted the American Airlines Southeastern Reservations office in Cary, North Carolina, via an AT&T airphone to report an emergency aboard the flight. This was the first of several occasions on 9/11 when the flight attendants took action outside the scope of their training, which emphasized that in a hijacking they were to communicate with the cockpit crew. The emergency call lasted approximately 25 minutes as Ong calmly and professionally relayed the information about the events taking place aboard the airplane to authorities on the ground. At 8:19, Ong reported the cockpit is not answering. Somebody stabbed in business class. I think there's mace that we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked. She then told of the stabbings of the 2 flight attendants. At 8:21, one of the American Airlines employees receiving Ong's call in North Carolina, Nadia Gonzalez, alerted the American Airlines Operations Center in Fort Worth, Texas, reaching Craig Marquis, the manager on duty. Marquis soon realized this was an emergency and instructed the airline's dispatcher responsible for the flight to contact the cockpit. At 8:23, the dispatcher tried unsuccessfully to contact the aircraft. 6 minutes later, the air traffic control specialist in American's Operations Center contacted the FAA's Boston Air Traffic Control Center about the flight. The center was already aware of the problem. And with that, we have finished reading 5 of 14 pages of subchapter 1.1. I hope you guys enjoyed the very informative and very moving report that was read and released by the U.S. government. It is all public for everyone to look at. And if you guys would like to stay updated, please like and subscribe. See you for part 2.